Well, it's great to be here. I don't know if Congresswoman Meng is still here. I appreciate the shout out to the two freshmen, Kathy Rice and myself. When we first get there, for those of you who visit the Capitol, you'll see that members of Congress wear an ID, a little pin. Their pin is like their member ID. And on the back of their pin is a number on it. And the number on the back of your pin is your seniority in Congress. So the back of my pin right now, you all know how many members of the House there are, 435. The number on the back of my pin is 434. So we really just got there. So Kathy actually has some seniority over me, being an R in the alphabet as opposed to a Z. I was just sitting there listening to Senator Schumer's words, and I don't know if I could possibly, I come here, I'm a Republican. I can't think of a single word that he said today that I would disagree with. And I think that it's important in this spirit of coming together and unity that I share that thought, I share that reflection. There are different philosophies out there right now in Congress. There is, I would respectfully say, and I don't mean this in the pejorative sense at all, Senator Schumer's foreign policy, is specifically with regards to Israel and Iran, is different than the approach at the White House. And as a leader of the Democratic Party and New York senior statesman, he is in a rare position to be able to help influence foreign policy at the White House. There are a lot of other activities we work through in the House. We've heard of anti-Semitism spoken of this morning. We're all reminded of that, whether you have had it on your radar like all of you have in the past, or maybe more recently since the attacks in Paris. It's come up a lot this morning, but something that wasn't mentioned, and it's on your brochures as far as your priorities, is with regards to Jewish cemeteries. And something that I believe that we need to become more active, and I appreciate the JCRC having it all over their radar. And there has been a growing bipartisan effort in Congress because, for example, right now in Pakistan, there is a move to convert one of their cemeteries to an all-Muslim cemetery, and we don't know what is going to happen with the remains of those Jews who are buried there. And I've heard a lot of concerns from people who have family members over there, and it's important that we take a strong stand right now. If you go on YouTube, you could watch the video of Churchill addressing a joint session of Congress 70 years ago. And it was a powerful moment. You could still watch it today and get goosebumps. Any appreciation of history around the world. I remember watching a movie. It was showing a map of Europe in World War II, when Germany had expanded to their largest borders, and it's shocking just how much Nazi Germany had expanded prior to the forces of good rising up, fighting them back, and defeating them. There was a debate going on, whether we heard a little bit of it here this morning or we hear more of it between now and March 3rd. I'm looking forward to welcoming the Israeli Prime Minister to Congress, and I'm happy that he's coming. Timing's kind of interesting, because he does have an election coming up towards the end of March. And it's also in that time period that the president is in the process of a very real, significant, important negotiation with Iran. I say important because whether you are in that room or not, whether you agree with the talks or not, whatever is agreed upon and the impacts of it for Israel, the prime minister, he has to come here. He has to speak to anyone who's willing to listen. And he's talking about issues related to the survival of a democracy. in a region filled with a growing tide of radical Islamic extremism. You have state sponsors of terrorism. And in the case of Iran, as we've seen over the course of the last week, literally working and successfully overthrowing a government as what we're seeing in Yemen. I look forward to listening. I remember, for those Shakespeare fans in the room, Henry V. Remember his St. Crispian's Day speech? He went from England to France. He wanted to take over France. As he told Kate later, who was Prince Catherine, who was the French princess. And the French princess wouldn't want to marry Henry V because he just took over France. And Henry said, I love France so much, I took it over. That's why you can marry me. That's how much I love France. Well, there was the Battle of Agincourt. At the Battle of Agincourt, while Henry V left England with 10,000 troops, he only had 6,000 left at the Battle of Agincourt. And the French showed up with 30,000. They were wearing armor. They had the cavalry. It was a daunting task and it was killing morale of his men. So he gave this very famous speech called the St. Crispian's Day speech. And you could probably find that somewhere on YouTube as well, because I know plenty have tried to do it justice in movies through the years. So morale was low, and Henry V said, I don't want any more people here fighting with us. It's just us. And after we win on this battlefield, we won't have to share in the glory. Generations from now, as we're talking to our grandkids, we could say that we were there on St. Crispian's Day. As we show our battle scars from here, we will say that we were there on St. Crispian's Day. I don't think that we should look at the Prime Minister's upcoming speech on March 3rd as just a speech. And I really hope that there is a way that very quickly, working with my colleagues in government who are here, that we can move past any type of discussion about where we all should be on March 3rd. Let's move past that part of it, and let's focus on our relationship with our strongest ally in the world, in Israel. There is no question where we should be. There should be no conflict as to where we should be seated. There should be no conflict as to when we shall stand. Decades from now, as you're watching the video, the generation or two that pass us, and they're watching the video of the Prime Minister's speech on March 3rd, they may ask, with all due respect, they may ask where the Vice President was. And I'm not saying that to be condescending, but I really do feel at this moment of time, with everything that's facing Israel, that it is that moment in time where it should transcend politics. Hindsight, let's move past it. Israel is a beacon of freedom and democracy in a region that is riddled with nations and with groups that once they're done wiping Israel off the face of the map, if they had their way, they never will, they would want to come after us and our way of life next. We live in a great, free, exceptional nation. And we need to understand that any enemy of Israel is an enemy of ours. So I leave here refreshed after listening to a colleague like Senator Schumer share his remarks. And I also leave here emboldened to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle so that together we can stand strong and united for Israel with the Prime Minister on March 3rd because of something so much greater than any type of a backstory, is that decades from now, people will be talking about this speech and this moment of time, and we will say we were there. We had no conflict. That's why we were seated. That's why when it was appropriate, we stood. And I welcome that opportunity. I thank the JCRC for having me this morning.